The doctor closed the file, and when he looked up, Robert immediately noticed that hesitation, because in his 72 years of life, he'd seen these kinds of pauses many times before, and each time he knew bad news was coming. "Thompson," the doctor began, seeming to search for the right words as he paused, then took a deep breath before continuing. "The results came back, and I'm afraid the situation is more serious than we'd hoped." Robert gripped his hands tightly on his lap and looked at the doctor's face. "Wait, it's advanced," the doctor continued. "Very advanced, and treatment options are quite limited. You're looking at about 3 months, maybe a bit more, but there are no guarantees." Robert slowly nodded his head and said, "I understand," his voice coming out calm even though he felt like something inside him was collapsing. The doctor handed him some brochures and talked about chemotherapy options, but Robert wasn't really listening because there was another voice in his head, one he'd been trying to silence for 45 years. "Sarah, the doctor told him to spend time with your family, get your affairs in order," and Robert stood up, thanked him, shook his hand, and left the room. Walking down the corridor, his feet felt foreign to him, as if he were walking with someone else's legs, and when he got on the elevator, he saw himself in the mirror, a 72-year-old man with white hair, deep wrinkles, tired eyes, and now just 3 months. When he got to the parking lot, he got in his car, but didn't start the engine, just gripped the steering wheel and tried to breathe. Detroit's November cold was fogging up the windows and darkness was beginning to fall outside. He took his phone out of his pocket, looked at the screen, and with trembling fingers opened Facebook. He typed Sarah Mitchell into the search box, doing what he'd wanted to do for years, but had never had the courage to do. He pressed enter and waited, his heart pounding. The results came up, and there was her first photo, Sarah Mitchell, Santa Fe, New Mexico. In her profile picture, she was smiling. Her hair had turned white, but she was still beautiful, still the woman Robert had loved when he was 27. That night when he got home, silence greeted him. Ellen had died 5 years ago from a heart attack. His children had grown up and moved to other cities. Robert lived alone in this big house in a quiet Detroit suburb. He turned on his computer and typed into Google, how to get from Detroit to Santa Fe. 2,040 miles, 30 hours by car. But Robert didn't want to go by car. He wanted to search for something else. How to ride a motorcycle, because 45 years ago, he'd made Sarah a promise. "One day we'll take a motorcycle trip together," he told her. "We'll ride Route 66, feel the wind, be free." Sarah had laughed and asked, "Promise?" "Promise," Robert had replied. But they never went, because Robert's family hadn't approved of Sarah. Robert came from one of Detroit's wealthy families. His father owned an automotive factory, and his mother was a society woman. It was 1978. Robert was 27 and studying engineering at the University of Michigan. Sarah was 25, a student teacher who had come from New Mexico. Her family had no money, and her father was a farmer. Robert had met her at a conference on campus where Sarah was one of the speakers, talking about education reform. The moment Robert saw her, he fell in love, not just with her beauty, but with her passion, her intelligence, the light in her eyes. Their first date was at a coffee shop where they talked for hours. Sarah told him about her childhood, about the small town in New Mexico, her father's farm, the starry nights. Robert talked about his dreams, about wanting to be an engineer, but also about wanting to be free. "Be free?" Sarah had asked. "Yes," Robert explained. "To get away from the city, hit the road, ride a motorcycle, just the wind and me." Sarah had laughed and said, "Me." Within 6 months, they were in love, madly in love. They saw each other every day and talked every night. Robert proposed to Sarah, and she said yes. When Robert went to tell his family, everything changed. "Who is this girl?" his mother demanded. "Sarah," Robert answered. "We're getting married." His father slammed his fist on the table and declared, "Absolutely not. She's not one of us. Her family has no money, no background. You're a Thompson. You have standards." Robert protested, insisting, "I love her." But his mother cried that he would ruin us, and his father gave him an ultimatum. "Either you leave that girl, or you leave this family." Robert called Sarah that night and told her, "My family is against it." Sarah went silent before asking, "What are you going to do?" Robert hesitated, and that hesitation said everything. "I don't know," he admitted. Sarah started crying and told him, Go back to your family. I'll manage." But when Robert tried to say no, "I'll be with you," Sarah had already hung up. The next day, Robert tried calling Sarah, but she wouldn't answer. He went to campus and couldn't find her. When he asked her friends, they told him she went back. "Where?" Robert asked, desperately. "New Mexico," they replied. Robert ran home and started packing his suitcase, but his father was waiting at the door. "Don't go," his father warned. "Don't destroy your family. That girl won't make you happy." Robert looked into his father's face and saw it all. The determination, the anger, the disappointment. And in that moment, Robert became afraid of losing his family, of being cast out, of being alone. He didn't call Sarah. He didn't go. He stayed. 3 months later, through friends, he met another girl named Ellen, who came from a wealthy family. She was pretty and kind, but she wasn't Sarah. Robert started dating her and his family was happy. A year later, they got married and had 2 children. Robert became an engineer, found a good job, and lived a good life. Ellen was a good wife and a good mother. But every night, Robert thought about Sarah. For 45 years. Every night before bed, he wondered, what if I had gone? What if I'd followed Sarah to New Mexico? But he hadn't gone, and now he was 72. His wife was dead, his children were far away, and he had 3 months left. The next morning, Robert woke up early, made coffee, and sat down at his computer to research motorcycle courses. There was one in Detroit that offered weekend training with a program called Motorcycle Training for Seniors. He called and registered, admitting, "I'm 72 years old." The voice on the other end reassured him, saying, "That's no problem. We've had students who were 80. Saturday morning, he went to the course, where there were 5 other people, all over 60. The instructor was a young man who was patient. When Robert got on a motorcycle for the first time, he trembled. The motorcycle was powerful, loud, and intimidating, but it was also exhilarating. The instructor told him to press the throttle gently, and when Robert did, the motorcycle moved forward. In that moment, Robert felt something he hadn't felt in 45 years. Freedom. 2 weeks later, he got his license. Monday morning, he went to a motorcycle dealership, where the salesman asked what he was looking for. "A Harley Davidson," Robert stated. The salesman smiled and asked, "Which model?" Robert looked around and spotted a shiny red motorcycle, a vintage model from the 1970s. "This one," he decided. "That motorcycle is 50 years old," the salesman pointed out. "I'm 72, Robert replied. "We'll suit each other." He bought the motorcycle, even though it was expensive, and cost him part of his retirement savings. But it didn't matter anymore. What did he need money for now? When he rode the motorcycle out of the dealership and through Detroit streets for the first time, his hands were trembling and his heart was racing. But he did it, and made it all the way home. That evening, his son David called to ask, "Dad, how are you?" Robert hesitated, wondering if he should tell him what the doctor had said about the 3 months. "I'm fine," he said. Instead, "I need to tell you something. I'm going on a trip." David sounded surprised when he asked a trip. "Where to?" Robert took a deep breath before answering, "Santa Fe, New Mexico." David went silent before asking, "Why?" Robert told him, "I'm going to visit an old friend," which was a lie, but he couldn't tell the truth. David protested that, "Dad, you're 72 years old, making such a long trip alone," but Robert interrupted with a firm, "I'm going," in a voice that left no room for argument. David understood and simply said, "Okay, be careful." The next morning, Robert prepared by packing a few clothes in his backpack, buying a map. He didn't trust GPS, and putting an old photo of Sarah in his wallet. He rolled the motorcycle out of the garage, red, shiny, powerful, and it seemed to be telling him, "Hit the road." He put on his helmet, got on the motorcycle, turned the key, and the engine roared to life, and he set off. When he left Detroit streets, the sun was rising. It was November and the weather was cold, but Robert didn't care. The wind hit his face, the motorcycle roared, and the road stretched out before him. For the first time in 45 years, Robert was free, just him, the motorcycle, and the road, with Sarah waiting 2,000 miles away. The first day he rode 400 miles on Interstate 80 heading west, passing through Illinois and then Iowa. In the evening, he stopped in a small town and found a motel. When he got to his room, his legs ached and his back was stiff. 400 miles was a lot for a 72-year-old man, but he'd done it. He lay down on the bed and thought about Sarah, whispering, "I'm coming. 45 years late, but I'm coming." The second day, he crossed Nebraska with its flat, endless roads, cornfields, and small towns. Every time Robert stopped, people stared at him. A 72-year-old man on a red Harley. They'd ask, "Where are you headed?" He'd answer, "Santa Fe," to which they'd respond, "That's a long way." And he'd agree, At a diner while drinking coffee, an elderly man came up to him and complimented, "Nice motorcycle." "Thanks," Robert replied. The man mentioned, "I used to ride motorcycles when I was young too," which prompted Robert to ask, "Why did you stop?" The man shrugged and explained, "Got married, had kids, responsibilities." Robert nodded, understanding, before asking, "Do you regret it?" The man thought for a moment before admitting, "Yes. Every day I regret it." The two men looked at each other, and Robert declared, "I'm riding so I won't have regrets," which made the man smile and wish him safe travels. On the third day, he entered Colorado, where the landscape changed from flat plains to mountains and the weather got colder. Robert had put on a jacket, but it wasn't enough as his hands were freezing. Yet he didn't stop. He passed Denver and climbed into the mountains where the road was difficult, winding, and dangerous. So Robert drove carefully. At one point, the motorcycle stopped, and Robert panicked, pulling over to the side of the road to check the engine, even though he didn't understand what he was looking at. He waited there, and after half an hour, a pickup truck stopped, and a young man got out to ask, "Having trouble?" Robert explained. The motorcycle stopped, and the man took a look, fiddled with something, and told him to try it now. Robert tried it, and the engine started. "Thank you," Robert said gratefully. "No problem," the man replied. "Where are you headed?" When Robert answered Santa Fe, the man whistled and warned, "That's a long way. Be careful." Robert promised. On the fourth day, he entered New Mexico, where the landscape changed again to red earth, desert, and cactus. The sun was hot, and the sky was clear. Robert was exhausted, and everything hurt, but Santa Fe was close. Just a few more hours. At noon, he reached the Santa Fe city limits with his heart pounding hard. He'd ridden 2,000 miles over 4 days, and now he was here in Sarah's city. He stopped at a cafe, took out his phone, and looked at Sarah's Facebook profile. There was no address listed, but one photo had tagged a cafe called Sunrise Cafe, Santa Fe. Robert found the address and went there. It was a small, charming, colorful cafe. When he went inside, a woman was at the counter and asked, "Can I help you?" Robert hesitated before saying, "I'm looking for Sarah Mitchell." The woman smiled and confirmed, "Sarah? Yes, I know her. She comes here often, usually in the mornings." Robert thanked her and left. The next morning, he went to the cafe early, found a table, ordered coffee, and waited. Every time the door opened, he looked up. 9 o'clock came, then 10 o'clock. Robert was almost ready to give up when the door opened and a woman walked in with white hair, thin glasses, and a gentle smile. It was Sarah. Robert froze with his heart beating. So fast, he thought she might be able to hear it. Sarah went to the counter and ordered coffee without seeing him. Robert stood up, took a step forward, and said her name. Sarah turned around and looked at him, her eyes narrowing as she tried to recognize him. Then her eyes widened as she whispered, "Robert?" "Yes," Robert confirmed. "It's me." Sarah couldn't believe it and asked in bewilderment, "What? How? What are you doing here?" Robert swallowed hard before explaining, "I needed to talk to you. 45 years later, but I needed to talk to you." Sarah looked at him silently before suggesting, "Let's sit down." They sat at a table, and for a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, Robert broke the silence by saying, "I'm sorry for what I did. 45 years ago, for leaving you, I regretted it every day and thought about you every night. And now I don't have much time left, because the doctor gave me 3 months. And before I die, I wanted to look you in the face and say I'm sorry." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she said, "Robert, I had no idea. I'm so sorry." Robert shook his head and insisted, "I'm the one who's sorry. I should have been with you. I should have acted according to what I wanted, not what my family wanted. But I was afraid and I lost you." Sarah reached out and took Robert's hand, telling him, "You didn't lose me. I was always here, and I thought about you every day too. When Robert asked, "Didn't you ever get married?" Sarah shook her head and admitted, "No, not that I didn't try, but none of them were you." Robert cried then, a 72-year-old man, crying in a cafe, across from his former love, 45 years later. Sarah urged him to stay for a few days. "Let's talk, let's spend time together." And when Robert protested, "I only have 3 months," Sarah insisted, "Then spend your 3 months with me." Robert stayed and went to Sarah's house, a small place outside Santa Fe at the foot of the mountains. They had breakfast together, walked together, and talked together about their dreams from 45 years ago, their regrets, and the time they'd lost. When Sarah asked, "Do you still ride motorcycles?" Robert smiled and confirmed yes. "I learned to ride so I could make the trip we were supposed to take together. I'm late, but I did it." Sarah smiled back and asked, "Show me." He showed her the motorcycle, and Sarah admired it, asking, "Can I ride it?" Robert was surprised and asked, "Now?" But Sarah smiled and said, "Now. We waited 45 years. How much longer should we wait?" Robert nodded in agreement, saying, "You're right." Sarah put on the helmet, got on behind Robert, and wrapped her arms around his waist. Robert started the motorcycle, and they set off, leaving Santa Fe's streets and heading toward the mountains. The wind blew through their hair, and the sun warmed their faces. Sarah was laughing, and so was Robert, genuinely happy for the first time in 45 years. Days passed, and Robert stayed, spending every day with Sarah. They walked, talked, and laughed together. They'd wake up early and make coffee, then sit on the porch watching the sunrise over the mountains. Sarah would tell stories about her years teaching in Santa Fe, about the children she'd taught, the lives she'd touched. Robert would tell her about his work, his children, his life in Detroit. But they mostly talked about what might have been, about the life they could have had together. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Sarah asked, "Would you have been happy with me?" Robert thought for a moment, before answering, "I don't know what kind of life we would have had, whether we'd have had children or where we'd have lived. But I know I would have been happy, because I would have been with you." Sarah squeezed his hand and they sat in comfortable silence watching the sky turn orange and purple. The days turned into weeks. Robert's pain was getting worse and he was losing weight, but he didn't want to leave. Every morning he woke up next to Sarah. They'd started sleeping in the same bed after the second week, and every morning he felt grateful. One night, Sarah brought up the inevitable, asking Robert, "Shouldn't you see a doctor?" But Robert refused, saying, "I don't want to spend my time in hospitals. I want to spend it here, with you." 3 months passed, then 4, then 6. Robert was still there, still with Sarah. He'd gotten weaker and thinner, but something had changed. He felt different. One morning, Sarah insisted, "You need to get checked. Please, for me." And Robert finally agreed. They went to a hospital in Santa Fe, where tests were run. The doctor asked for Robert's medical records from Detroit and spent a week reviewing everything. When they returned for the results, the doctor sat them down and looked at the file with a puzzled expression. "Miss Abson," he began, "the results are different." Robert waited. 6 months ago, your doctor in Detroit gave you 3 months. I've reviewed your file, and the situation was very serious. But now," he paused, "now it's different. We're seeing signs of improvement." Robert looked at Sarah, who was smiling and crying at the same time. "How?" Robert asked. The doctor shrugged and admitted, "Sometimes it happens. It's rare, but it does happen. We'll continue to monitor you." When Robert and Sarah left the hospital, the sun was shining. They walked hand in hand. "We lost 45 years, Robert reflected. Sarah nodded but added, "But we're here now. We're still here." A year later, Robert was still in Santa Fe, living with Sarah. Every morning, they drank coffee together, and every evening they walked together. Sometimes they'd get on the motorcycle and ride into the mountains. Robert was still dealing with his condition, but he was alive. The doctors couldn't explain it, and Robert didn't try to explain it either. One morning, Sarah asked, "Do you have any regrets?" When Robert asked, "About what?" Sarah clarified, "About the 45 years we lost." Robert thought about it before answering honestly, "Yes, I regret it. Every day, but I'm here now with you, and that's enough." Sarah smiled and agreed. It's enough for me, too. The sun was rising. Two people in a house, drinking coffee together. They were 72 years old. They'd lost their youth, but they'd found each other, and they were still here.